How is everybody doing? Strength Chat episode 128, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by a multiple US powerlifting champion. She was also the 2017 IPF World Champion with a background in bodybuilding and gymnastics, and is a self-proclaimed strong mom, or mom strong, whichever way you want to go around it. Today I am joined by Marisa Inda. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I'm considering the circumstances, I'm doing great, so no complaints over here.
Good. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on the podcast. What have you been up to over the last couple of weeks or months, and what's been happening in your world?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate because I have a garage gym, so I'm able to train. Also, Chad has a garage gym, so either way, I feel like nothing has really changed too much for me in terms of my ability to train. So I feel very fortunate in that aspect. On the flip side, definitely feel for people that don't have a gym, have clients that don't have access to anything, and then just a big scramble for everyone to try to at least get some weights at home so they could do something versus doing nothing. So it's definitely been crazy, but I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. And for the most part, I didn't have too many clients that were negatively affected either. So they either had like their own home gym or had somewhere where they could go. So
yeah, that's been pretty good. I know, because as it fell over here, it would have been in March time. Myself and a couple of my clients would have been competing, but luckily quite a lot of them had garage gyms, so we could still have a little bit of a mock meet. Admittedly, just in their own garage, but at least we could still work towards that. How have you found it? With the clients that you work with that potentially don't have a garage gym, have you been able to change things around from there, or?
Yeah, just mainly just giving them to like pivot their goals and understand that even if you have to take 2 months where you don't get under heavy load, you can still try to prevent a ton of muscle loss by doing body weight movements, and also just focusing on a time to heal.
Yeah.
To rehab. I mean, even for myself, as much as it sucks to have worlds canceled and not be able to compete, it's also kind of nice not to have to always go heavy and put your body under a ton of stress, potentially get hurt. I know for most of us, when you get to a certain level, you're dealing with aches and pains all of the time, year round. So I feel like instead of taking this time to focus on, I can't train heavier, I'm not going to be able to hit that, that PR or compete, just, take a step back and go, okay, this is just a great time for me to rehab things that are hurting, and actually next time I step on the platform to have everything start feeling good again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes you've got to think of things as it's an opportunity to work on other areas. It doesn't have to be what am I going to do now? And obviously we chatted a little bit before we started recording, and you mentioned that obviously county by county gyms have been opening back up. What's your or have you heard anything in terms of competitions that are coming up for you, or is that sort of getting back to normal?
Yeah, so nationals for us is in October, and we have to win our national weight class in order to compete at Worlds. So that's still slated to go down in October. It's in Florida, which Florida is a state that has been opened up for a couple months now. So I'd be pretty surprised if that got canceled. But then again, I feel like just given the climate, we just don't know. So, kind of train for it and then see what happens. And hopefully like the decision comes down, faster, sooner rather than later. I'm the type of person that I just kind of like to know, like if I don't have to be training heavy, then I won't.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully, touch wood that if everything is, especially over here in the UK, a lot of the lockdown has been easing a little bit. So hopefully competitions can get going, and especially if Florida has eased lockdown a lot more. Hopefully all that can happen. So obviously I did a little bit of an introduction, but for everyone listening who might not know your background and how you got involved in powerlifting, and you're and involved in coaching and your background in training, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, so I started actually lifting weights when I was 17 years old. Prior to that, I was a gymnast, and I was just looking for something to do. I had tried other sports after I stopped doing gymnastics. So I did track, I don't know if you can consider dance a sport, but I did dance, and I just didn't feel like especially like I hated running. I just didn't feel like that same kind of competitive spirit for those sports. So actually a friend of mine was just like, hey, my parents got me a gym membership. You want to come with me? I have like a free guest pass. So I went, and she took me upstairs to like some aerobic step class, which was awful. I nearly died. So I was like, I'm going to go downstairs, get some water. So it was like a 2-story little gym. So I went downstairs and I just walked into the weight room, and I've just been hooked ever since. And so when I first started, I did bodybuilding. I wasn't too familiar with powerlifting, although I was always pretty strong. I was really fortunate to watch people that just focused on squat, bench, and deadlift, free weights. And then, competed in bodybuilding when the direction of that kind of got, out of my liking, which is the women were getting bigger, a ton of drug use. And, I didn't want to go down that road. I stopped competing, but I still trained. And then I saw a flyer for a powerlifting meet. Said, hey, I've always been pretty strong, and just kind of jumped into that. And I did that when I was in my 30s, and I've just been hooked ever since.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And how did you sort of progress to the coaching side of things? Because obviously, and I think I'm going to have to get one of the T-shirts, JTS, power building and powerlifting. How did you? Was it a natural progression to get involved in coaching, or how did that really go?
I always kind of help people in the gym, but I had like a quote unquote real job. I have a degree in biology. I worked in, labs doing research for a while, and then kind of fell into doing real estate. And then when the big market crash happened, when I was working in banking, I was out of a job, and I was like, kind of what could I do? I have this degree, but I hate doing research. I hate being in a lab. And, but then also nobody was hiring. So I was like, okay, well, I still have bills I have to pay. I have to support my family. So I just started, people asked me to train them. So I started training people and doing in-person training, going, no, I really love doing this. And it just kind of took off from there. And then, meeting Chad and working with Juggernaut, and it's kind of just evolved from there. So I'm really grateful that I'm able to do something that I love, something that I'm passionate about, but it was not something that I just, started doing from day one. Yes, I've been lifting since I was 25, but like everybody else, you don't really think that that's a career path that's going to generate any type of income to be able to provide for your family. So you kind of fall into that, I need this 9-to-5 job. And, I really feel like the recession and being, everyone being forced to pursue my passion kind of led me in that direction, because I don't know if I was forced to do it if I would have done it, because you kind of get used to a steady paycheck. And when you do go self-employed, you're not getting that steady paycheck anymore. You really have to hustle to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I quite like asking that question, because, when it comes to training, whether it's powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, whatever area you want to do, you start off doing it because, or people start off doing it because they enjoy it. And I always, because I know for myself, getting involved in training, I originally started training to help with rugby, because I wasn't the biggest kid growing up. So I thought, watching strongman when that comes on, I want to be like these guys. And then I think it went too far one way that, as I've progressed through the weight classes, I maybe should drop down a little bit more. But it starts off as, thinking that it's something you enjoy, and then to be able to do that as a full-time job is, doing something that you enjoy. I laugh with, because a lot of my friends who have an interest in sport or training, are still in a 9-to-5 job, and I always have to think, I don't know whether I could wear a suit to work. I don't know whether I could wear a suit every day. I quite like wearing shorts to work, and interacting with different people all day, and it is still something that I enjoy. Obviously, when we were chatting about about the schedule going forward, when we mentioned about training and lockdown easing, you mentioned there about if you don't have to lift heavy, you won't have to, and it's apparent from what you've said there that you enjoy training. And sort of one of the first questions that I wanted to chat about is, when you first got involved in training, was it just thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to give this a go, I'm going to try that, or when did it get to a point where you thought, oh well, I'm going to take training potentially a little bit seriously, and I want to start seeing a little bit of progress or competing?
Yeah, so when I first started, if you want to go way back to when I was 17, I really loved the way women's physiques looked for bodybuilding. So like Rachel McClish, Corey Everson, Sharon Bruneau, because I really felt like they embodied still looking very feminine, but still having like, wow, like she put in a lot of work and her physique was to me very pleasing to the eye. So even when I first started lifting, I had a goal, and that might seem very narcissistic, but it was a aesthetic goal. I liked the way muscle looked on women, which back in that time, this is 1994, there wasn't very many women in the weight room, number one. And number two, like I was 17 years old, high school girl, that's probably typically not the route most women would take. But I was really embraced in the gym by all the guys that were in there were just super excited to like teach me, this is the barbell, you don't want to do lightweight, you still have to get under load. So I was really fortunate to be embraced by like just, guys that weren't there to like hit on me or intimidate me, but actually wanted to help me. So from day one, I feel like I had goals that I was chasing, that I wanted to get better. I wanted to have a better physique. I wanted to put on more muscle. And then when I switched over to powerlifting, I had no idea really what I was doing. I was still training like a bodybuilder. So the first meet that I went into, I didn't know anything about, phasic training. I didn't know anything about proper peaking protocol. I just went in as a bodybuilder. I didn't even know you had to pause the bench. So all of these things came as a surprise, but I actually just loved the environment. I loved, just putting bar on my back and going, crap, I think I could do more. And then the chase happens. Then it's like, okay, meet number 2, I need to squat and bench and dead this. And meet 3, and you kind of just keep chasing the idea of being able to push your body to the next limit.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing when you catch sort of the powerlifting bug, if you like, calling it a chase. I was chatting with a couple of my clients the other day, and we'd finished one block, and it's like, right, what's the goal now? And obviously, over in the UK, we'll use kilos, but sometimes, especially when you're using pounds, sometimes the number sounds cooler than what it is in kilos. So yeah, I completely get about, when you get the powerlifting bug, there's always, you're always chasing and wanting more. Just touching on obviously you mentioned when you first went into the gym and you had goals, and switching it to maybe from a coach's point of view. Quite a lot of people will go into the gym and they'll have role models that they'll look up to, and I want a physique like that, or I want to be able to perform like that. But sometimes, and a phrase that you picked out there, that you knew how much work it took to get to that level. But there's always that underlying feeling that sometimes, I'm sure you've seen enough memes and that sort of stuff, that people will go in, do one session, look in the mirror and go, oh, well, I don't look like who I was wanting to be. So what's your thoughts on, putting across to be able to lay that foundation, and the fact that you have to be consistent and ultimately patient in building up towards reaching that. And it's not going to happen overnight.
I definitely think that's the hardest part of being a coach. I think we live in the instant gratification society where it's like, if I do this today, I want this tomorrow. And unfortunately with lifting, or just trying to improve your physique in general, it's just not a reality. So I try to coach people into enjoying the process more than the outcome, especially with powerlifting, where it's like you're just training for that meet day on the platform. So then everything before that is kind of like, oh, this is, I'm doing this again, or I have to squat, I hate doing volume, but I have to do this, or I have to do that, but they only care about putting the heavy weight on their back. Well, the problem with that is you're just, focused on the outcome instead of the process. So you have to learn to enjoy the entire process. And I think that's what's kept me in the game for so long and consistent for so long, is the discipline and enjoying the actual process. So I think that's like the hardest thing to do as a coach, especially when you have lifters that are starting later in life. So women that come to me that are barely starting to lift in their 40s and 50s, and, comparing themselves to these, other 40-year-olds who have maybe been lifting since they were 20. So it's just, tempering the expectation and just, getting them to enjoy feeling better, feeling stronger, and enjoying their own process versus comparing it to everybody else's.
Yeah, I think, like what you said there, comparing to other people, I think that can be quite a big demotivator, or think, oh, well, I'm never going to be able to reach that goal or be able to look like that person. Whereas actually, just focusing on yourself and thinking about how far you've come is going to be a lot more beneficial. One thing that I wanted to mention about is there's some clients that might come in and they just want to do powerlifting, because obviously now powerlifting, you know, you can type in on Instagram and there'll be loads of powerlifting handles, and you know, with social media, I think it's a little bit more popular, if you like powerlifting. But for the majority of people, when they first come into the gym, a lot of it is aesthetics. You know, I just want to look a little bit better, or feel a little bit better. Do you feel as though, you know, yes, they need to enjoy it, but you need to sort of reach your aesthetic goals first and build that discipline and consistency of training to get to that point before you start looking at other avenues of training or try everything out? Or do you feel as though you know, you can have a variety of training when you first start off and then become a little bit specific?
I think when you first start out, it's better to build a good foundation. I think that's where you look at the people who are at the top of their game. They're very muscular. They're at the top end of their weight class. Even for me, as far as the 52s are concerned, I'm probably one of the most muscular 52s, you know, if you put us all up in a line. So I think focusing, you know, not necessarily just on aesthetics, but focusing on building muscle, you know, working on that foundation, it's going to make your lifts that much better, that much prettier, that much easier. So, I mean, and that's why, you know, phasic training is so important, because it does take you through the hypertrophy, the strength, and the peaking blocks, so that you're still able to test your 1 rep maxes, but you're not constantly staying in that block of just always testing. You still have to go and build as well. So, yeah, I like I tell everyone, if you chase strength, which is putting weight on the bar, the aesthetics are going to come behind it. On the flip side, if you're just the cardio bunny and you're not putting any weight on the bar, you're also not going to change your physique, and you're not going to have any visible body comp changes that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the fact that you mentioned two sort of different ends of the spectrum there, because I think sometimes people can come in and think, right, well, I'm going to put all my eggs into one basket and just focus on that. Whereas, you know, adding in an all-round approach and, you know, focusing on that strength, but still ticking all the other boxes is, I think, you know, a really important way of looking at it. One thing that I also wanted to touch on, because it was funny, I actually I did a boot camp session this morning, and we were speaking about how sometimes you can go two ends to one extreme, and you come sort of consumed with, oh, right, well, I can't do this or I can't do that because I've got a session, I've got this, which sometimes from the outside looking in could potentially look as an unhealthy lifestyle. And I know you've put on that you still work through your calisthenics and sort of have what I'd like to call a play part of your session, where it's a fun part. How important do you think that is in keeping on there and keeping sort of a level head of making sure that you don't go to extreme where your fitness and training is sort of all consuming and you don't have time for other things?
Yeah, I think it's really important for longevity in anything. You know, you have to have not only like a physical break, but a mental break as well. So, yeah, of course, when you're getting ready for a meet, you have to be 100% focused on that, and doing outside things is going to interfere with that, especially when you get to a certain level. There's going to be a different discipline and drive that goes along with that training block. But once I'm done with that, I think it's really important to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and just pull back from all of that, do some things that you enjoy, that are fun, that are still active, and, you know, just to give your body and brain a break. You know, I mean, I don't know how some people do it, because, you know, I see people on Instagram and they're just always, you know, hitting those heavy sets, and it's like, man, I just don't even know if my body could handle it. You know, I'm pushing on 44 years old here. I want to be doing this until I'm in my 70s, till it's no longer fun for me. And I can't imagine always putting my body underneath that kind of stress all of the time without pulling back a little bit, taking a little bit break, giving not only my muscles and my brain, but my tendons, my joints, just a little bit of break from all of the heavy lifting. And this way too, when you go back to it, if you've taken 4 weeks and you've dialed it back, you're excited to get back into the gym again, and you're extra motivated. So that just helps the discipline set in a little bit more versus just going hard all of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually put I think I put a post out about this, and I think sometimes just going heavy all the time, you kind of like what you mentioned there about, you know, feeling that your body would be able to do that. I kind of think it makes you feel too tired to actually do anything else. I know, you know, because especially people that are starting to get involved in powerlifting. So I'll train predominantly a lot of beginners, sort of into intermediates. And when they're speaking to me in the build up to the competition, I'm always speaking about, I'm actually looking forward to after the competition, because in the build up to it, you'll know yourself, you can sometimes feel a little bit beat up, you know, you're a little bit tired, just because, you know, the amount of weight that you're lifting to build up to that heavy lift, you know, hopefully that PB on the platform, is going to take its toll on your body. So I think sometimes it is a good way to just drop back a little bit, because just touching on that, and you know, talking about the patient side of things, do you think that people go wrong in terms of wanting to push it all the time and try and lift heavy all the time, because, you know, they want to be like the people that they've seen on Instagram, or the people that they're following, thinking, oh, well, I've seen them lift this heavy single on Instagram, so therefore I must be doing that all week, rather than thinking, you know, well, actually, like what you mentioned about building that foundation to end up building up to that, and there's only so many occasions that you're actually going to lift a PB or lift heavy.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially newer lifters, because, you know, PRs come much quicker. So it's like, oh, you know, I put 50 pounds on my squat this year and I can put another 50 next year. And it's like, so there's this excitement, like, oh, I can get, you know, from point A to point B and be on the same level as this person who's been lifting for 20 years. Maybe there are outliers out there, but the fact of the matter is, yeah, you're going to make very fast gains when you first start, and then they're going to be slower and slower and harder to come by. And I'm definitely guilty of being frustrated when things don't progress. I mean, when you get to a certain level, it's adding 1 kilo. You're lucky if you can add, you know, 2.5 kilos on your bench a year. And that's frustrating. And that's when the discipline has to come in to just keep plugging away and keep getting after it. But yeah, I definitely think that Instagram, social media in general, puts it in people's minds where they start following one person's training protocol and they think that they need to be doing that same thing without taking into account that person's, you know, age, their training age, their leverages, their nutrition. It's, you know, it's different for everybody in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned there, because obviously the level that you're lifting at, you know, mentioning there that it might be 2.5 kilos that you're increasing it a little bit about. I always think that, you know, I've had conversations with people that are coming in. It's, oh, I've been stuck on this weight for 4 weeks. How long have you been training? 12 weeks, right? Well, there's some people out there that have been stuck on, you know, might have had a year stuck on this lift to progress. How long do you think it is? Because I think there is the beauty of powerlifting is obviously you need to do the competition lifts in training, and it's the same thing that you're going to do on a platform. Whereas for rugby, football, basketball, you can't always replicate the actual game day environment. You can do the training methods and work on things, but sometimes you've got to play what's in front of you. So in terms of actually changing things around, because sometimes if it starts getting a little bit too tough, or the numbers aren't going up as much, how long do you give it before you actually change things around? Because I know for some people, when they see that progress going and they start hitting that wall a little bit, and now it's like, right, you know, you need to start putting that effort in and keep working through. When do you start changing things around?
Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because for most people, they're not really taking everything into account when things aren't moving the way they want them to move. Is your nutrition dialed in? Are your stress levels? Are you injured? So it's easy to get frustrated, and I'm speaking more to myself than like everyone else out there. But for my squat, for instance, I get really frustrated because my numbers just don't seem to be moving in the same direction as my bench or my deadlift. But it's like, okay, well, I've been dealing with sciatica. I've been trying to change my stance. So when you factor all these other things in, is that you can't always just blame, okay, well, is it my programming that's not working? Well, it's not necessarily the programming that needs to change. It's you need to give yourself time to build back up, given the circumstances and your individual, you know, injuries. So sometimes it's not necessarily that. Sometimes it's you have to just keep going, and you know, if everything else is progressing, and it's sometimes it's just, it is what it is. Yeah. You know, I mean, again, as you get to a certain level, some lifts are just going to be stagnant, and then you have to look at your programming. Okay, well, is it because I've, you know, for bench, we always say is adaptive resistance, where you're only doing the competition lift so much that maybe you need to then bring your feet up and bring your grip in a little bit to start, getting yourself back ready to lift more in the competition lift. So yeah, there are changes that need to be made sometimes, but sometimes it's other factors that need to be looked at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that was a good explanation there, because why I mentioned about, do you think, because people will look at the program straight away to see what's changed, because I think information on training and technique and the lifters that people might be following, obviously you see the training that they're putting out there, or their training diary, but it's not always the photographs or the Instagram posts that you see of, right, well, I'm getting an early night tonight because I've got a big session tomorrow, or anything like that. Do you think that's the case, that there's obviously a lot more readily available information on the training side of things, but do you think that the information on sort of sleep and stress and nutrition is becoming a little bit more ready available, so that people can filter it out to make sure that they can still keep making progress, or look at those different elements?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think there's so much information out there. It's sometimes hard to filter through what's accurate information, what's inaccurate information. And, unfortunately, we're not all experts in everything. So it's easy to, grab little pieces from everything. And I think sometimes when you start doing that, it's just information overload. It's like, change one thing, hold on to it for a couple blocks if that doesn't work, because if you're trying to pull from every direction, it's hard to know what's working and what's not working, what's negatively affecting you and what's not. And then too, when it just comes to the nutrition side of things, most people have a hard time with that, regardless. It's confusing, it's meal prep time. And the fact of the matter is 90% of people, probably more, aren't even doing that side of it right. So, and if that side of it's not right, you're not going to have body comp changes. It's hard to get stronger. It's hard to feel refreshed and recovered if you're not eating, or if you're eating badly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's sometimes the frustrating things, because I know I've had it myself, where you'll read as much as you can, or try and find as much information as you can, and then you sort of expect the results to come. And when that doesn't happen, it's kind of like, oh, well, right, well, I'm just gonna try and lift a heavy single or anything like that today, because obviously what you've seen hasn't, or what you've read hasn't been working. But exactly like you say, sometimes you've just got to stick with the process and keep working through. That sort of moves nicely onto the second part, and it's about the cycle of training. So obviously, with powerlifting being predominantly, an amateur sport, when people are coming in, and there'll be times when people can really push training, and there'll be times when they're going to have to drop off because of life events, and obviously with the what you've mentioned about being mom strong and having kids and big life events like that, how did that affect sort of your training and your goals and how to progress from that?
Yeah, so when I was pregnant, I was still lifting. I lifted throughout the entire 9 months with both of my kids, and I think because I wasn't involved in powerlifting at the time, I was still doing bodybuilding style training, that it actually benefited me, because there wasn't this really fast push in my mind to get back to my 1 rep max 2 weeks after giving birth. I think that's a big reason I don't have pelvic floor issues. I don't pee on the platform when I deadlift, because I never got under heavy weight when my body wasn't ready for it. Yeah. So for me, I took my time. I did the first 3 months after having my kids and just did kind of full body weight movements with dumbbells. And my focus at that time, even while I was pregnant, was just to maintain the muscle that I have. I knew I wasn't going to get stronger or get leaner, obviously, you're pregnant, but just to maintain what I had. That way, when I gave birth, it wasn't hard labors, and I was able to, feel pretty decent. Granted, I was, low on sleep, but, and I was able to get back into the gym and just kind of slowly get the bar back on my back, give my body time to go back to normal, because it does take time for your body to readjust. But I think people have this really big fear, if they take too much time off, they're never going to regain their strength. And the fact of the matter is as long as you're doing something, it actually comes back a lot faster than you think. I was able to start lifting again, 6-8 months after, barbell back on my back. And, it was fine. It didn't really, take as much time as I thought it was going to take. I've had a surgery even when I was powerlifting, and I had to not lift for 8 weeks. And I was still back to benching, back to my 1 rep max within 3 months after the surgery. So yes, you do have to take some time to dial it back, but it's not like your strength is gone forever. When you get back in the gym, you start working back towards it, it comes back relatively fast, especially once you have that great base and a good discipline and consistency about you. It does come back much faster than people think. So I do notice a lot now when, girls get pregnant and they have the baby, it's like this really quick rush to get the barbell back on their back. And it's like, just take your time. You just had a kid, you put your body through a lot, enjoy that. You're also low on sleep. You're not probably eating as much as you should because there's that big push to like look a certain way right after you have a kid. So it's just definitely not the time to get back in the gym and try to get back to your 1 rep max.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with major events like that, it's I think sometimes think that they will have regressed and they'll go actually back to square one. But when when I've used the word, maintain with some clients, at least you haven't regressed. Maintaining actually is quite a good thing. And going into, if you're building muscle or trying to drop fat down, that sometimes you have to let your body just level out a little bit, maintain a little bit, and then you can go again. Because obviously, with scenarios when you have time away from training, and lockdown's a really good example of not being able to have use of equipment. Do you think that there's a big difference between something like lockdown where you've not been training as much and an injury, and can they both sort of come back together, or is coming back from an injury something completely different to just having time off from training due to other circumstances?
I would say they're similar and not similar. So yes, similar in the sense that you both have to dial it back, and there's that that time is going to take to build the strength back up, the mental games you play with yourself where you feel like you're going to be weak or you're not doing as much as you should be doing. But when you're dealing with an injury, the mental part of it and the confidence getting back under heavy weight, I think, is a lot different than when you just had to take time off because of quarantine, because your body's not in this state of pain all of the time. I know just from dealing with sciatica, not being able to bend over or hinge, that for me, like when I had to go and approach the bar on a heavy deadlift day, that's scary. It causes a ton of anxiety. So even before you touch the bar, you keep thinking like, is this going to hurt? Am I going to be able to do it? And when you're already playing those mind games of what ifs before you even touch the bar, I feel like that's a lot more detrimental than, oh, hey, I just couldn't lift for a couple weeks, but my body feels totally good. Because when your body feels good, training is much more enjoyable. You're excited about training. But when your body hurts, it's like, it takes a lot more effort to get in there, or even when you have to dial it back and do workarounds because you're not even able to pull from the floor or do the same things that you were doing before. So, or just even getting out of bed when you're just like, man, I remember the days when I used to roll out of bed and didn't think anything of it. And now it's like this, special move so that you don't hurt yourself getting out of bed.
Yeah, I think mindset is quite a big thing, because, and like what you mentioned there, just having a couple of weeks off. I know myself. So last year, I took all of my holiday. I had a couple of days in New York, and then I had just over 2 weeks in Florida. And obviously, I didn't have time to train, but that was my choice. I wasn't injured. Yeah, when I came back. I think my coach at the time had given me high bar sets of 10, which after eating my fill and being in there and drinking enough beer in the sun wasn't that was a different type of mindset. But on the flip side of that, I think the year before I'd actually hurt my back, and it's exactly what you say. It's a different mindset of, well, I might hurt myself here, as opposed to sets of 10 are just going to absolutely leave me really tired. Do you think that, just touching on the mindset side of things, that when things or time off from training due to traveling or family time or anything like that, for the long term, is actually from a mindset side of things, actually a good thing to keep you fresh, as opposed to people that might actually just be training consistently all the time and never have any prolonged time off? Because I know, having time off, you may end up taking one step back, but like what you mentioned, you can always build up from there. Whereas, if you're training consistently and don't have as much time off, would you say that there may be, as they keep going, at a higher risk of potentially getting an injury or burnout or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also just from the aspect of living your life, right? It's when I get new clients and they're like, well, they're trying to really focus on this. And I'm just like, okay, well, do you want to be an elite lifter? Well, no, I never can be. I'm like, okay, well, go on your vacation. And just for the marathon of lifting in life, like, it's important to know, like, hey, if I take 2 weeks off, I want to go on this vacation, I don't want to lift that. Hey, when you come back, yeah, it's going to feel hard. You're going to be winded. Weight's going to feel heavier, but you'll come back from that within a week or two and you'll be back right where you were before. So I definitely think it's important just for longevity purposes to know that, hey, it's going to be actually okay if you do absolutely nothing while you're on vacation, or in times like right now where if you're only able to do body weight, yeah, it's going to feel terrible when you go that first day back in gym. It's going to feel like you've lost all of your progress. But after that first week, after the soreness wears off and you're back the following week, you're going to be right back in step to where you were. Maybe it's going to take you a month or two to catch back up, but you're no worse for the wear.
Yeah. And with that, because, having time away, what are your thoughts on, because, when after a competition and you've got maybe a little bit more freedom, or you've got a little bit more time in the build up to a competition, I like adding in some strongman events, not, crazy heavy, because I don't want to injure myself, but, it's fun carrying stuff. I like playing around with the log, yourself with calisthenics. What's your thoughts on actually moving away from different sports? So, giving a powerlifter going into strongman, or, bodybuilders going into powerlifting, and actually within the realms of iron sports, if you like, actually having some time off. Do you think that's sometimes beneficial to keep things interesting and then come back to powerlifting, or do you think that's actually, detrimental long term?
Yeah, if their main goal is to, do well in powerlifting, and once we know their meet schedule, yeah, take your 4 weeks and go and have fun. If your goal is to kind of just be good at all things, then yeah, I've had clients who start with me for powerlifting, and then after a block, they're like, hey, I think I want to try weightlifting. And I'm like, okay, well then go to this coach for weightlifting. And then they do that maybe for a while, and they decide, oh, I want to be, they don't ever have the aspiration of being completely specific and doing really well in just one thing. So yeah, if you kind of just want to do general fitness and try different things, I think it's great. If your goal is to progress and be better at powerlifting, and that's what you want to do, and that's what you want to be competitive at, then yeah, it's definitely fine to take a few weeks after meets to kind of have some fun, but then you definitely have to get back on program to keep progressing.
In terms of progress and actually getting results, do you think that, because, I've had clients that want to play around with different sports, and, it's like a little circle. 1 month might be powerlifting, strongman, then something else, and they just keep looping that. And the actual progress that they make might not be as, I can't think of the right word, can't be as all the time, making progress all the time. I completely lost my train of thought. I couldn't think what the word was, as opposed to powerlifters who, if they're committed to that and they want to compete, can make progress on progress. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's just individual basis. I've had clients who like to do running as well as powerlifting, and obviously and it's endurance running. So those are two very polar opposite types of things. And they want to be competitive in both. But we also have to look at their schedule and go and decide what their priority is going to be. So if in this training block their priority is powerlifting takes priority, the running is still there, but it's not as prioritized. And then their next meet might be, okay, we want this next meet, my priority is I want to do this marathon. Okay, cool. Marathon is going to take priority, but then they know like lifting will be there, but it's got to take a little bit of a back seat so that, we're able to peak for what you want to do better at. But also going in knowing like when you're doing both, you're not going to be as good in just the one thing because you're not focusing on that. You're not being specific just to that one sport. But yeah, it's definitely doable. And, you know, it's not like you can't be good at both. Will you be great or the best? Well, that just depends on the individual, their talent, their genetics. And, you know, again, there are outliers out there, but for most people, like you got to pick one or the other, but you can still do both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned there, you know, you've got to pick one or the other, because I've actually had a client who first really wanted to do strongman, and, you know, program for that, and had a little bit of a play around. Whereas now he's actually got to a point where the actual, you know, his static lifts when he was going into the strongman events were actually getting better. Obviously, you know, log press, we've changed that round to bench press, because in powerlifting it's not log press. Although that'd be pretty cool, log press, deadlift, and then a squat. But you know, it's become a little bit more specific. Whereas you wanted a little bit of powerlifting, a little bit of strongman, and I think, yeah, when people start seeing something progressing, I think it's good to sort of have that specific event that you can keep pushing. Other things going on in the background, but keep pushing on that. I think sometimes when we're talking about potentially getting a little bit of frustration and trying to take all these little bits and trying to do everything at once, I think sometimes that can be a little bit of a hindrance. The other side of sort of the cycle of training is mentioned there. Obviously, the more experience you get with lifting, the more sort of you need to think about the other things and sleep and work on your mobility and warm-ups and that sort of stuff. How was your training, either the intensity or the volume or your routines have changed over time? And you know, at the top level, how many tweaks have you changed for the success that you've had?
Yeah, so it sucks. I hate to be that person like, oh, getting old sucks, but there are like aspects of it that do like suck. I mean, you've been training since, you know, 17 years old all the way up to now, and you're like put your body and you ask a lot of your body. And yeah, for me, I've had to incorporate more warm-ups, which before I would just get underneath the bar and start with the bar and then go from there. And now it's like, oh God, I better do some breathing, better make sure my back's not gonna like completely crumble underneath the bar. So yeah, that's definitely been a big change for me, just focusing more on preventative stuff, especially as I've had to deal with like the sciatic, and, you know, making sure that I keep that at bay, because if that comes back, it's like I already know all of the workarounds that I'm going to have to do to get back to feeling good again. And it's just definitely not something that I want to have to be dealing with every single training block. So doing more warm-ups, being more mindful when things don't feel right, and then just dialing it back from there. Like right now, I'm not really getting ready for anything, so there's really no need for me to be pulling heavy for high volume right now, especially if it's going to cause injury. So just kind of being mindful, like, okay, I'm not going to have a cool deadlift video for Instagram, but it's not a big deal. I'm not getting ready for anything. So it's just, you know, more volume, but not so heavy.
Yeah. And one thing that I'd quite like to ask is that, you know, that you mentioned there, obviously, you'll add more things into your warm up, and I know I've added more into my warm up as I've progressed, and as I've learned more, and as I've started maybe picking up more niggles and that sort of stuff to address them a little bit more. But is there anything that that's been your constant throughout? Because, you know, there's certain I'll always do ankle stretches, even though actually when I'm squatting, you know, it's not always my ankles that feel really tight. It might be my hips or anything like that. But I always like to keep, you know, ankle mobility exercise in there. Is there anything that you've kept pretty consistent throughout your training?
Yeah, I've always, you know, and the powerlifters always have like, they're against like, oh, I deadlift, so I don't need to do abs. I've always consistently done direct ab work. And that might just be a hangover from doing bodybuilding. But I actually think, like, even in the midst of dealing with like my sciatic and my back issues, that having like those strong abdominal muscles have just like really helped and prevent me from being that, you know, immobile. Even when I've gone to see my chiropractor, they're just like, oh, you're really fortunate that your whole core and you're all the way from the bottom to the top is just very strong. And that's keeping your pelvis in line. That's helped your hips stay in line, because otherwise it would probably be more trash than it is.
Yeah. That's actually a good topic, that, because I'll incorporate quite a lot of, especially since I hurt my back a couple of years ago. I kind of went on a fact-finding mission to find out how can I strengthen that, because obviously I didn't want it to happen again. And on the flip side of that, deadlift has become probably one of my strongest lifts. And speaking about the core side of things, do you think that sometimes, maybe not in just in powerlifting, but in weightlifting or whatever iron sport it may be, do you think that there's sometimes an element of stubbornness that they don't want, that it shouldn't be? Oh, you don't need to do direct core work. I've been deadlifting for X amount of years, and that's absolutely fine, because I know we've covered sort of, the cycle of training and being patient and enjoying the process. But do you think stubbornness can actually be a hindrance and is still there in some form in powerlifting and other sports?
Oh, 100%. Because I think a lot of these like smaller muscles, vanity muscles, as I like to call them, just aren't, it's like, oh, well, that doesn't really serve any purpose. But if you really think about like from head to toe, like everything kind of serves a purpose. I'm 100% the type of person that neglects doing calves. Like I hate doing them. I mean, and I should do them more, just because I get teased a lot about how I have corn dog legs because my quads are so big, but then I just have a stick for calves. But if I like really think about it, I'm sure if I trained it how could it not help improve something? Yeah. Be it a walkout, be it just doing anything. It's got to have some improvement. It's a muscle. Yeah. So yeah, I do think there is some stubbornness, and also just some laziness. I mean, let's be real. Once you've done, like you said, if you're in tens and squats, and then you have to do all of this other accessory work, the last thing you want to do is calves or abs. It just comes down to like, I'm just tired and I just want to be done.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that. My sort of kryptonite is, any single leg exercises. All of a sudden, doesn't matter what I've done, even if it's at the start of the session, all of a sudden I've become quite tired. But it goes back, full circle to what we started chatting about at the start of the podcast is, following that process. And if you've got the goal of, I want to lift X amount, or I want to compete, or I want to look like that guy or that woman, you've got to put those hard yards in sometimes, and follow the process. And then you get to a point, because one of the biggest things that when you mentioned about taking into factors such as nutrition, in nutrition, sleep and stress, I went up a weight class, I think maybe last year or the year before, and I did it just by eating everything. I just thought, I need to get bigger, so I'm just going to eat everything. And actually, you mentioned it a couple of times through this podcast. How do you feel? And on the platform, yeah, my numbers went up, but in the grand scheme of things, I didn't feel great when I was on the platform. Yeah, I lifted more, but I ended up being the next competition that I was at when I competed at nationals. I was slightly heavier, but my body composition was a little bit more. And it's that, again, you mentioned it through there, that if it's a muscle, it's going to be a little bit more rather than just being heavier. So, I think there's a couple of things that we covered in there that 100% are really good reminders of, when it comes to getting stronger, it's not always about, right, I'm going to test my 1 rep max today. There's other things to it. So quite a lot of things covered, but the most important question to round off, for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Take-home point is, and I preach this all the time, is consistency is king. Regardless if you want to just compete or you just want to look good or feel good, because I've always been asked like, well, why do you try to stay leaner year round? I'm like, well, because I compete twice a year, but I live with my body 365. So I like to look a certain way all year round and feel a certain way all year round. And that takes consistency. And, it's whatever you want to be good at in life, be it powerlifting, bodybuilding, better at your job, you have to be consistent in the daily practices of those things to be better at that. So you want to learn how to eat better? Well, you have to try to eat better every single day. It's consistency that's going to lead you to your goals. So that's always my main takeaway. You got to put deposits in the bank.
Absolutely. I think, when people, I think that's a really good point to finish on. And I think it's when people ask for, what's the magic formula to getting stronger? What's the magic formula to putting more muscle on? What you've just said there is the magic formula. That's what you've got to do to reach the goals that you want to achieve. I don't think there is any sort of overnight fix or magic exercise or magic food. It is consistency, and I think you can build up to becoming more consistent, but the fact is you've got to start somewhere and start laying that foundation and build it up from there. So yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. I really enjoyed a couple of topics that we picked up on there. But for everyone listening who might have any questions about anything that we chatted today, or maybe wanted to ask you any questions or see the content that you put out there, where can people find you or reach out and contact you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Marisa Inda, just under my name. Same for Facebook. If you're looking for programming, power building AI as well as powerlifting AI, that's through jtsstrength.com. If you're looking to incorporate calisthenics and just do something fun, that's through programming called Limitless, where we kind of just, kind of do a little bit of everything. So yeah, you can reach me through there and have any questions you have.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. Really enjoyed picking your brains and, chatting about training and powerlifting and all that sort of stuff. So thanks again. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.